talked about Georgia for a little bit. Let's turn our attention to the Heisman Trophy. And, obviously one of the most prestigious uh, one of the most prestigious trophies in all of college football. And, there's a couple obvious names that kind of come to mind. You have the Fernando Mendozas of the world, the Julian Sayans, Marcel Reed, Jeremiah Love, even Jacob Rodriguez at Texas Tech. I'm really glad he's getting some love too. I always like to see the defensive guys getting a little bit of Heisman love too. And, with that said, I routed off a couple of names there, but who would be your top 3 to 5 in terms of how you look at the Heisman Trophy race right now?
Yep. Rodriguez for sure. I think with what Rodriguez has done at Texas Tech and the way, I love the Texas Tech story. As a college football fan, you should love it. I was talking to an older guy a couple of weeks ago. He's like, "Oh, I can't stand this damn NIL and this transfer portal." And I'm like, "Why? Why don't you love everything about Texas Tech? It's making them relevant." I mean, I loved it back when I was in college, seeing Michael Crabtree knock off, Texas. But for what they're doing, what Cody Campbell has done, has been fantastic. But I think Rodriguez for me is number one. Mendoza's done a nice job. He's kind of picked right up where the Maple missile left off last year. Done a really good job. I'm interested to see what that looks like in Indianapolis against Julian Sayin in Ohio State. Matt Patricia has done a phenomenal job with that Buckeye defense. So I'm interested to see kind of where that goes. Number 3, Gunnar Stockton. Why is Gunnar continually left off this list? Again, look at the stats. Look at where he's at. He's thrown 3 interceptions on the year. You look at his stats, and especially like when it matters the most. He's coming back against Tennessee. The second half comeback against Alabama. Yes, he fell short, but he still was very, very good. Missed a wide open wide receiver, kind of ball fell through his hands, or maybe Georgia wins that game. Look at what he did against Texas. Look at what he did against Ole Miss. Stockton continues to put up those big numbers. And then the last one is Jeremiah Love. My buddy Rob Williams, who's my co-host, is very irritated that Notre Dame is still in the college football playoff. They're one of the best teams out there right now. Sure, they lost early on in the season to Texas A&M. They lost, to Miami. But that's a young team, and they're trying to figure it out, and they figured it out. They're blowing out teams. So, to me, that's my top 4 of what I'm going with. Julian Sain's done a nice job too. If we want to go 5, he can round up my top 5. And then I also have to give one quick shout out. My boss will love this one. Fagano at UConn has thrown 1 interception all year and should at least get a seat at the table, because if he's got UConn relevant in bowling again, done a great job. By the way, Penn State should look at Jim Mora.
Yeah, I thought about Jim Mora too, because I've covered Penn State before too, mainly when I was living in the Northeast. But I think Jim Mora's probably look at the UCLA job more. That would be my own. I'd be kind of intrigued to see him go back to UCLA again and see what he could do, especially since he's in his mid-60s. So he'd probably be pretty content with just going to UCLA, winning 8 to 10 games there, and riding off to the sunset. But I'm glad you mentioned Fagano too, because he definitely deserves a shout out, and for what UConn has done over the past couple seasons with Moore and that entire staff is phenomenal too. But I'm glad you mentioned Jeremiah Love too, and I definitely can be a Notre Dame hater on the show. I'll be the first one to admit it, because they piss me off at times. But at the same time,
it's a job though.
Exactly. But Jeremiah Love, he deserves all the credit in the world for what he's done. He's rushed for over 100 yards the past 6 games that he's in. He rushed for 228 versus USC. He has 17 touchdowns on the year, and he has a final game versus Stanford this week. So that could definitely be intriguing if he puts up another 100, 200-yard game, even given the inconsistencies of that Stanford team in general. But I guess when I look at my Heisman too, I think my first has to be Mendoza. And, my buddies over at Tell the Whole Damn World podcast, they cover all Cal football. It was interesting talking with them about Mendoza over the summer compared to them now, and just seeing the progression and everything too. And I think that comeback win versus Penn State, for me, I don't know if I want to call it a Heisman moment necessarily, but that was like that comeback win that I kind of said to myself, like, hey, I could see him holding up the trophy in late December, early January. That was kind of the moment for me too. But The only other thing I'll mention too, in terms of the Heisman Trophy, and I definitely want to get your thoughts on this too, is my concern. I'm sure you heard about this too, how the Heisman Trophy, they're delaying their voting a little bit until the last, like, I think like 2 weeks of the year or something.
Yep.
You heard about that, right?
Yep.
But my concern about it is, let's say that Indiana, Ohio State end up being in the Big Ten championship game in Indianapolis. My concern is that, whether it's the media or just how it kind of shapes out, my concern is that whoever wins that game, they're going to be the Heisman Trophy winner. Because then if Ohio State and Julian Sain win, they're going to be like, well, that's Heisman performance, versus Mendoza, for example. I think even if they lost that game by 3 points, for example, his body of work to me would supersede Jeremiah Love or Julian Sain or Marcel Reed or even Gunnar Stockton too. So that's just my only real concern about them kind of moving that back.
I've had this debate too, and it makes me wonder too, is, are we giving the Heisman too early? There's nothing in the Heisman Trophy that says this is a regular season award. It's the best player in college football. You look at the 2 weeks. I'm looking at a college football season that doesn't end until January 20th. So we have another 6 weeks after the Heisman, 4 to 6 weeks after the Heisman is presented, that we have meaningful college football. And to me, I think there has to be some consideration of that. I understand where your frustration could be, what Mendoza's done, what Indiana has done, and then Sain comes in and they win by 10 or 14 points, and then Mendoza's star sort of fades a little bit. But to me, isn't that what the Heisman's about? The biggest players making the biggest plays on the biggest stages, and I get a lot of flack. I covered the Heisman for Last Word. My buddy Rob does now, but it was one of those things, and trust me, it was like I was touching a sacred cow by bringing that up. But it's like, I look at it and it's like, it should matter. It should matter more. It's not just because of tradition. I mean, the whole game is changing. Shouldn't the most prestigious war in college football adapt and change with it as well?
Yeah, and you're right in that sense, because it is evolving, and I'll be the first one to admit on the show, I'm a traditionalist kind of guy. If it's up to me, we'd be playing the national championship at the Rose Bowl every year. That's how much of a traditionalist I like, from my perspective.
5 o'clock, right, for the sunshine?
Yeah, that's it.
Over the San Gabriel Mountains. I love it.
But nevertheless, yeah, I mean, it's tough, because let's say you do wait until the end of January, right, to do that. My only pushback on it is, would the Joe Fraganos of the world, for example, would he get an invite to the Heisman Trophy ceremony in New York City? Like that, I guess that's what I'm more concerned about. Like, if not saying we're discrediting the people who vote on the Heisman Trophy, it's more of, are we making sure that the actual best players in the country are there, not players representing the people in the playoff?
And I hear that, but I'm going to be curious. Do you think Fagano's going to be there in December this year? I mean, he should.
He should, but he's not going to.
He's not going to be. Last year was an anomaly. We had Travis Hunter, two-sport, athlete, or two position athlete, coming out of Colorado, and then we had Boise State running back, who I'm all of a sudden drawing a blank on.
Ashton Genty. Yeah.
Thank you. I don't know. Total brain fart there. So that shows my SEC bias. I guess he wasn't playing the SEC, so I had no idea who the hell he was. But like that was an anomaly last year, right? It wasn't a quarterback. It wasn't guys from those traditional conferences, and so it's the push pull, and it's like, if it's the Heisman and it's the best player, shouldn't we have those best games being played so that we actually know? Because I don't know, like, is Jeremiah Smith, should he have been the Heisman last year? Because he had a pretty nice little playoff run, and I can understand and I can appreciate the idea of it, like honoring the regular season and being more inclusive. But if we look at it, for the most part, this award really isn't. It really traditionally has not been an inclusive award. It's been who's the best quarterback on the best team, and that's been largely who's won it.
Yeah, because I guess when you think about it too, you think about some of the other awards like the Davey O'Brien Award, and I'll rattle off a couple of those other ones. You get what I mean? But it's I guess that's what you kind of find too, because most of the time it's like, okay, if the quarterback wins the Heisman, they're going to win quarterback of the year. Or Travis Hunter, okay, he wins the Heisman, he's going to win. Why he's going to win the Bolikoff? Like you get what I mean. So
Yep.
it's one of those things where how can you find that balance between, hey, we're getting the right guys on the podium for the ceremony and they get the love and the recognition that they deserve, but also how can we make it in a sense where we're honoring the traditions of the Heisman Trophy, honoring all those guys of years past, but also kind of influencing at least a little bit of the playoff, for example. Like even if, for example, let's say Julian's saying in Ohio State, let's say they do get eliminated in the first round, like them getting eliminated in the first round shouldn't necessarily impact his standing in the Heisman Trophy. Like, yes, it could impact it if he throws for 4 interceptions or something, maybe,
Yep.
but not necessarily if it's a back and forth game and they lose by 3.
Sure. No, I'm right there with you. But yeah, I think we tend to all be prisoners of the moment, even the media. That's why we're wrapped up with Lane Kiffin right now, because that's the shiniest object. And I think it's probably going to be the same thing with the Heisman, especially if we move it. Who had the biggest, first round matchup? Who was the biggest player in the quarterfinals, the semis, national championship?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just glad though that I would like to see more coverage on the Heisman Trophy. I get it, because there's other things going on, but at least for me, it's like these type of conversations just kind of reaffirmed to me that even though yes, the game is changing between the NIL, the transfer portal, and all those other things, there's still those kind of things that still make you want to come back season after season.
For sure.
But yeah, Craig, I appreciate being generous your time and coming on and talking some ball. Where can everybody find you on Twitter or YouTube?
Yeah, so Twitter at McMichael7. I'm usually on there. I like to be active. Like I said, a lot of SEC content, but like to banter back and forth. I don't take myself too seriously. I enjoy the game. I have great passion for the game, but I'm also not afraid to poke at some folks and do it in a loving way. But yeah, every Sunday night on the Chief Sports Network on YouTube, we have SEC Sunday night, 8 p.m. Eastern. My co-host Rob Williams and I will look at all things the SEC. We have a lot of guests. We also bring some stuff on. Rob, love to have you on sometime soon. We also bring in folks from like the Big 12, Big 10, things of that nature, and our friends from the Message Board Genius podcast too. So